right, here we go. This is value-based pricing, a guide for digital agencies. So if you're in the wrong room, it's a long hike back. I want to get an idea, how many people here are responsible for sales? So raise your hand if you have to sell for your organization. So more than half. How many people have to scope? All right, so more people have to scope. How many people don't care about that stuff? All right, one person. You might be in the wrong room. And this might be a little bit dry because we are going to talk about some numbers and some things around value. And I asked my wife, how could I make this more interesting? She's not technical, she looked at it and she goes, the only way you can make this interesting is to turn it into a drinking game. So every time I say value, I want you to make a little mark on your paper. That's how many shots you would have to take if this were a drinking game. You would be crawling out the door. So this is really 4 steps to scoping for higher profits. You guys want to make higher profits with the projects you have?
Please.
I think it's universal if you're in this business. So there's the hashtag. If you want to use it, you should know it by now. Gene Hammett is my Twitter handle. And here we go. Now, I know this is the opposite end of the spectrum, and you don't sell like this guy. But a lot of people avoid sales because they think it's slimy and shifty. Does anybody resonate with that? I hear that.
Slimy and shifty part, or the thinking that it's
Thinking that it's slimy and shifty. Because that guy only cares about him, right? And that's not the way we sell, I hope. So I want you to think about this. Being the trusted advisor. If you could stop selling and be the trusted advisor, do you think you'd sell more and have happier clients? I picked a picture about the white lab coat. I was looking for the advertising studies that were being done around saying if you just wear the white lab coat, you'll sell more stuff. But I couldn't find that. But what I did find was this from the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology. They did these double-blind studies. They did multiple studies. The people that actually wore the white coat performed better on the test. So if you want to sell better, maybe you should go get a white coat. A lot of this stuff around value is not just about what I think. It started that way. And I know other people before me have talked about value-based pricing and about value approach and determining the value. But think about this. You're already drunk. Think about this. Relationships based on value will last longer than relationships based on price. Can anyone disagree with that? Think about the things you buy. You don't necessarily buy them based on the price of them, if it's not a commodity. So I interviewed Melanie, is a friend of mine. She loves to ask that lifetime value customer question. It changes the game when she can get in there and determine the value to the clients. One of the sponsors here, Randall, you guys know Randall at Sava? He owns a technology business, but not just any technology business. They put their customer relationships first. And that was really pretty interesting when I was talking to him about value-based pricing. And actually, he didn't want me to let go of any secrets, so he was a little bit tight-lipped about how he goes about his pricing, which I understand. But value-based pricing is really important. Jason got asked this question today. Do you figure out your proposal scopes based on time or fixed fee? So would you guys like trading time for money? Raise your hand if you'd like it. That's how you do it. What if there were another way? If you are better at doing something, as you get to be a better designer or a better coder, should you be paid for an hour's worth of work the same as someone else that takes longer? Or should you be paid more? I think you should be paid more. The client should value it more because you're done quicker, probably more efficiently, probably a better solution as you have more experience. So maybe you keep raising your rates, but then if someone looks at, well, why is your rate 150 and theirs is 75? Do you just say I'm better? You could say that, but you might not get the work all the time. So the idea is to build a case around it. Stop trading time for money. Traditional fixed fee in business. I grew up around this. I've been in agency back in 1990. I was in a traditional agency. 1996, I started selling websites. I worked with Jason a few years ago in his agency. And scoping with fixed fees are really hard. Would you guys agree with that? The clients want to change things, then you got to go to the change orders. Nobody likes that conversation, but it's really hard. One of the problems is, maybe I shouldn't have started with one of the problems is, because I'm going to ask you a question. You guys so good at what you do that you can sit down with a client, within 5 to 10 minutes, you already know what the solution is? You kind of know they're going to need a website, they're going to use Drupal, they're going to use these technology pieces. If you are focused on the features and functions too soon in the conversation, you will miss all of the important stuff that the client could tell you that allows you to price that better, that allows you to be positioned in a different place. And most of the people I talk to, I work with a lot of clients, they will jump right into, I know in my head how to scope that project. The rest of the conversation is validating that thought. And I think that's a mistake. Jumping to conclusions is a problem. I was going to use something about the assumptions, but that ask, you, me thing, I didn't really want to go there with the video. I did. It's part of the stick. Hugh, give me a chance here. Jumping to conclusions can get you into trouble, right? If you're pushing out proposals too quickly without the thought, without scoping this appropriately, will that get you into trouble? Especially if it's fixed fee. Especially if whatever you put together from a requirement standpoint is not clear. I worked on a huge project, multi-million-dollar project for a Big Six consulting company. And in the requirements document, it said in multiple places to include these and more. And they would list a bunch of stuff. I'm like, what is this and more stuff? It was almost on every page. They're like, well, whatever the client comes up with, they just put it in here. Is that the way it works? And they're like, essentially. I guess it worked for them because they were getting paid by the hour. I didn't tell you who I am. So let me just position this just quickly. I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I went through Big Six consulting, strategy consulting for the first probably 6 or 7 years. I worked with a small agency. After that, I worked with a .com doing e-commerce consulting. And I ran my own business for 9 years. I became a business coach because something really big happened in my life. I'm not going to tell you what it is. If you're really interested, go to my website and you can read the whole story because I don't want to waste the time talking about me. But when I became a business coach, I felt like I could truly make a difference. I could truly work with people and make a difference in their business. And my focus is really important to you because I work with digital marketing companies. I work with agencies. I work with owners to help them identify how they can price better, how they can navigate through these things better. And everything I'm sharing with you are stuff that I've applied with my clients. So it's not just me talking about these things. I've actually done it, and I've actually taught people how to do it for their business. So what is value-based pricing not? Well, it's not just charging more. A lot of people ask that question. Well, I have a problem. I can't charge company A this and company B this for the same solution. I'm dumbfounded by that question because I've never seen two solutions that were exactly the same. We're not selling widgets, right? Everything you probably do is custom. I mean, if you sell a hosting plan, maybe that might be a widget. But when you're selling consulting work, it's not the same. And value-based pricing is not just charging more. It's understanding the problem to a deeper level and understanding the value behind that problem and coming up with the unique solution for the client. So it's not about charging more. This is also a point of confusion. A lot of big brands are using their muscle, using their weight, and throwing it around and saying, I'm going to pay you based on your performance. Has anybody faced that? It's going to happen. But that's not value-based pricing. That's performance-based pricing. That's identifying what is important to the client, and you get paid some base amount, and then you get paid extras for hitting certain performance measures. It's a unique way to do it. It's different than the other traditional ways, but that is not value-based pricing. So another big X. Anybody got a tally so far on how many values?
I can't get up.
How many of you guys like to have retainers? There wasn't a good picture, so give me a break. How many of you guys like to have retainers in your business? Like you like to be able to know what's coming in every month. It's really a good way to run your business, to have a baseline to work from. And if that covered all of your costs, great. And then you go out and get projects on top of that, that's awesome. I would personally, I like doing both. Having projects up front, retainers to do continuous improvement. But the reason I put this in here is because one of the places where I use value-based pricing really well ended up in a retainer. And the short story of that is I was actually sitting in a coffee shop one day, like a Barnes & Noble, and I overheard someone talking about they need an internet consultant. I was studying for my coaching thing. This was about 3.5 years ago. I was studying for my coaching certifications and all that. And this agency, this person owned the agency, didn't have anybody to scope out the project for her. She had been working with a client for 6 months on some design elements, but didn't have anyone to do the business strategy part as it related to the business, to the internet. So I interviewed with her. I got the job. For 2 weeks, I interviewed, I think, 33 people inside the company. I interviewed people outside the company. And you know what came out of that? They were throwing away a lot of money. We identified just within one part of the project, their e-commerce solution, the partner that they were using was charging them 68% of their sales just to be the technology partner. They weren't doing anything else. And I said, if you change to Magento, you would save $7,000 a month. I never would have identified that if I wasn't using value-based pricing. And what came of that was a $15,000 retainer over 12 months. If I had just pitched them on, we'll redesign your website, I don't know if we would have gotten the business. I understood the business, and then we pitched them on how to really change it. Value-based pricing starts in the mind. It is not just about pulling out this formula and running through it. You have to believe in what value-based pricing is. You have to believe that you can charge more to a client by coming up with a unique solution for them. It's not just charging them more. So here are those 4 steps I promised you. Gap, value, solution, and offer. There is no rocket science in any of these. These are very basic, fundamental, if you even. But when you go through this process, you will have a much better chance to understand the client. And the key here is that every step of the way adds value to the client, it adds value to your company, and it adds value to you personally, because you are listening and you are getting a deeper understanding of that business and developing a solution that addresses their core problems. So let's walk through each one of these. Gap. Some people talk about this and they think they do these things really well. Understand where the client is now and where they want to be. What's that vision? You've got to understand the vision of what they're going to. If you want to sell a client on a big project, you've got to attach it to the vision of how they see themselves in that future. What is possible? Why is this important? Why do they want to do this project? What are the drivers? What are those pains and challenges and the aspirations? All of those things get included in the gap. You guys ever heard this term, the gap? Because I just realized I didn't actually explain what it is. It's the space in between where they are now, where they want to be. And there's a gap there. And you're positioning yourself to be the bridge across that gap. The warning here is too many people begin to focus on the solution. They hear a little bit about what the client has and they jump to conclusions. They focus on the features and the functions or the technology. If you talk to some of the more experienced agencies in here, they probably don't sell Drupal and lead with that. They're working with the client and then Drupal just happens to be the technology that gets it done. So I did a business owner survey. I had about 150 people that I went out, and it was hard to do this because a lot of people didn't want to take the time, but I had 5 questions. And one of the questions was, what do you want when you're looking at your website success, measuring impact? And I specifically went to business owners, not agency owners. There's another survey for that. But this is what came out of it. They want sales, they want engagement, they want leads. This was the order which all of these people put, well, not all of them, but this is what the consensus came to. Do you see where design ended up on this? Last. Design is important. Design is the minimum, but it is not the most important thing to the client. So all of this is in a infographic. I know you can't see it on the side here. But if you go to this URL, you'll get a link that will take you to that. Value. Understanding the value of this project. Now, the example I'm going to give you is not every project. But if you're working on the marketing side of this, you've got to understand the lifetime value of a client to your prospect. Anybody not make it to the keynote today? So a couple of people. I'm going to share something with you that was in there that I thought was really important because I added a slide at the last minute because of what David said about lifetime value. But you also have to calculate the acquisition cost to get new customers. Do you think those numbers are important? If you're working on the marketing side of websites, they are critical for value-based pricing. If they're not doing marketing stuff, it's more internal applications, I'm serving my current customers, how are you going to measure the value of that? That's what this is about. If you're going to do value-based pricing, get really freaking good at understanding the value. Without understanding this, you're basically just doing extra steps in the traditional way of doing it. And I think that goes without saying. Could I have 4 steps without including value in a value-based pricing guide? So here's the example this morning. So David talked about growing their company. And one of the things that he threw out there, just matter-of-factly, we knew we were charging an average of $1,000 per customer per month. We knew that that customer was staying with us for 5 years. So the lifetime value of that customer to us was $60,000. Why is that important? You know how much you can spend. Exactly. If you're trying to get your customers to spend more money and to create a better solution, because I know a lot of them have budgets, but they also have value that they need help to calculate. Here's where you're adding value to them through this process. You're helping them calculate those things. And the secret is it's not that hard. It's not scientific. You can quickly do these things by asking the right questions. The acquisition cost that David talked about was $8,000. So he knew that what they could spend and what they were spending. So what if someone came in and sold him a solution, a website that could close that gap down to $5,000? He'd be open to it, don't you think? What about your customers? Understand that value, and you'll get much closer to actually performing value-based pricing. So the solution. This is where a lot of people think, I got this too. I know how to develop a solution for a client. A great solution is part strategic and part tactical. The strategic side is they are creating, selling that vision. Where are they going? The tactical side is how are we going to get there? What are the plans? You must be really good at this. This is the traditional way of doing it. You learn about the solution only, and then you write up your statement of work or you write your proposal, and you know what it takes to get these things done. You know how to do those things. You have to still do that, but when you're actually pricing it, you're going to price it on value. Why do you need both? Anyone? You got to make sure you can deliver all of those functions and features that end up coming up in the solution at a price point that makes sense for you. Because there could be a lot of things that they want to put in there, and we can't do that. This second bullet point here, it's optimal to build it together. Does anybody work with their clients to build proposals side by side? 1, 2, 3?
You mean like have them build it too?
Yeah. It is a really good way to build intimacy and connection with your clients. Is it easy? It's not too hard. It goes back to mindset. But if you can build it together, there's no surprises at the end. If they say they can't afford that feature, then you move it to a new phase. I've built spreadsheets where we've been in rooms with executives before, and we are just moving things around on the spreadsheet. And then when everyone goes, okay, that's it, that's the solution. And I remember this happened once. A large, it's actually based out of Japan. They have an office here. I sold $555,000 worth of e-commerce software to them. And we sat in the meeting doing exactly that. We didn't give them a proposal. We sat in the meeting with the president and the vice president and the marketing person and my team, and we moved things around until we got the project the way they wanted it. And they walked out of there. I think we actually bought the beers. We're like, let's go get beers. We got a deal done. Because we built it together. There were no surprises. We didn't think that, the next day when we were sending them paperwork that they were going to change it because they were involved. Your solution must be different. If you are seen as a commodity, you will not get the higher price. I like to tell stories. Is that okay with you guys? I think the stories is one of the things you will remember. I had one of my clients who thought he was well positioned for a city website. And he probably was. He knew the mayor. He lived in the city. And he knew the selection committee. He actually, when I was talking to him, I said, so what's their budget? He goes, I knew you would ask that. He knew the budget. He went through the whole process, RFP and all these competitors come in. About 3 weeks later, he called me up and said, I didn't get that deal. So what happened? He goes, well, they chose another company. And I said, oh, really? He goes, I said, why? He goes, because they've done a lot of the same kind of projects. They've worked with the cities just like this over and over and over. They stacked up the successes. It was the safe choice, right? The reason I share this with you is because they were different. They did have those successes and references. And they knew that client better than anyone else could serve them. They built a solution that was better. My client came to me and said, his name's Adam. He said, it gets worse. I go, what do you mean it gets worse? He goes, well, I know you, Gene, you've been talking about, differentiating and finding a focus for my business. And you told me that you would get paid more money if you did that, because you'd be an expert. I said, yeah, we've been talking about that for a few months. And he said, well, the company that won, remember, government contract, was 3 times the bid that he put in. Because they're not going to go with the cheapest bid just because they're government. They're going to go with the safest choice. And this company offered the safest choice. And they billed them the way they wanted to be billed. They didn't want to be billed 50% up front. This company knew that cities don't have that kind of money sitting around. So they said, we'll bill you $3,000 a month. They know the client. They differentiated themselves in the process. Your solution must be in alignment with the customer's goal. So if you go back to that first gap, do you have their goals understood? Do you know how you're going to measure their goals? Do you know how you're going to really build a solution that allows you to meet those goals? Now, the final step here is communicating that offer. You can use proposals. Jason talked about a template that he uses, and I personally know that this worked 80% of the time because I worked side by side with him for a while, and it worked. It did work. But you have to make sure you know what to put in those proposals. And that's what value-based pricing is all about, is taking all of those previous steps and all that work you've done. And I know it sounds like a lot of work. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. But you are combining all of that together to create a unique solution. Your offer has to be seen as unique. If it's a commodity, you will get tossed aside. What makes you unique? What differentiates you? What differentiates you? What solution are you describing that makes you different? That is where value-based pricing works. It's not just charging more. I love this concept, and I can't remember where I heard it from, but people, you ever heard aspirin versus vitamins? Dave talked about it this morning. People will not pay for vitamins the way they'll pay for aspirin, the painkillers. So once you've identified the pain within the organization, they'll pay for those things, but they won't. A lot of people have trouble selling proactive services. Well, we'll maintain your website for the next year. And most clients, I guess 50-50, but they're like, we don't need that proactive stuff. Why didn't you build a good one in the first place? Why does it need to be maintained? Anybody get that one? All right, so there's the summary. Gap, value, solution, offer. It sounds complex. There's a lot of parts to it. I don't know if anybody read what I put in the description, but I teased you. What's the number one way that which agencies are doing this? I'm going to show you. Qualify. So right here, again, I couldn't find another good graphic for qualify, but does this client meet you? Jason said today, I'm interviewing the client just as well as they're interviewing me. Are they a good fit for my company? Are they in alignment with where I'm going? Do the skills match up with my team? Are we available at this moment for this project? Because if you're not, they don't qualify. On the other side here is the big project. So how many of you guys want bigger projects? I thought that'd be universal. How many of you just want more profitable projects? Okay, everybody. So think of this as the more profitable project. The traditional way is to, after you've qualified them, is to learn as much about that business and about that solution and about that project, and for you to put together a great proposal and for you to push it over there. And you're going to win about 25% of those. If it's truly outside of your, it's a little bit bigger than you've ever done before. You don't win all of those. We didn't win 80% of the ones that were just outside of that. We won 80% of the ones that were really good fit for us, where we were differentiated. But the way I'm talking about is by selling a strategy session or a discovery phase. Again, I'm bringing Jason up again multiple times. It's almost like we're cousins or something. But if you can sell that initial project for what you estimate to be 10% or 20% of the fees, you are much better off with that client for many reasons. One, you get to really scope the project. You get to really do the value-based pricing concept, but they're going to pay you for it. I purposely let this out, the retainer story about the client where I went in for 2 weeks and interviewed all those people. Do you think I did that for free? No. They paid us about $9,000. And it was so worth it to them to understand and justify where this project was going. And that's what the strategy project does. It allows you to build that intimacy, to build the connection, to build the relationship, and then produce products. This is where, if you've ever received an RFP that you weren't included in, but you know someone else was, it's probably not worth bidding on. But when you do the strategy phase, sometimes what you're coming out of that is an RFP, if that's what the client wants. Sometimes it's just a statement of work. Sometimes it's the roadmap. Sometimes it's identifying what's working and what's not working. The strategy session should be based on what your clients need and identifying how you can move forward. Don't think of it as just a sales engagement that they're paying you for. Think of it as a project. Over-deliver. Give them more than they expect. Because what happens when you do that really well, it's so cheap and it's so valuable to them that you can probably sell it 90% of the time. And then you get the big project 90% of the time. Does that make sense? The top agencies, and I've talked to 7 of them in the past 2 weeks. Almost all of them are trying to do this every project. Are you taking pictures? Just kidding. Does that make sense? To hammer it home, the value-based pricing is a long process. It is intensive. It takes time. The better you qualify, the better you will be at knowing who to spend time with and sell that strategy session. Inside the strategy session, a lot of the stuff you're doing is discovering that value, that customer lifetime value, the acquisition cost. And I say it the last time. They are paying you to do that because it does add value to what they're doing. And they see you as the bridge between where they are now to where they're going, and you can sell that project much more often.
Can you explain the acquisition cost a little bit? Like, what is that? Like, how do you figure that out?
How do you figure that out? Well, it depends on what you're selling. So if they have a marketing budget and they have all of the things that go into the marketing and sales aspects, and they add all those things together, and that becomes a total cost for the year, how many customers did they get, or how many do they expect to get from that? So an acquisition cost is sometimes a big number. It's not just the incremental cost per lead, right? Because some businesses are out there, well, I can get a lead for $100. That's not your true acquisition cost. That's the cost of the lead. How much does it cost you? What's your conversion rate? So all of those things, it's strategy. If you want to make more money in web design and web development, stop calling yourself a designer and a developer. Call yourself a consultant. that does design and development to help them figure it out. Because a lot of companies, I mean, I've walked into some really big companies that I would look at some of the processes they've done. And I'm like, this is ass backwards. Why do you do it that way? You can add value to almost every client you want to if you step up and do it. All right, so a lot of people fear this is too difficult. It is not easy, but it's basics. It's going into it the right mindset. It's leaving some of those beliefs that my clients will never pay more than what I'm charging them now. Almost every one of my clients that I work with says that in the first conversations. I'm charging the maximum amount. I said, really? I just pushed a button. I thought I lost something. And I can work with them over the course of a month, and they're charging double what they used to charge. I'm like, what happened to that belief you had that you had it all figured out and that was all you could do? It's not that difficult, but you have to apply yourself. There's not a lot of numbers in here, but a lot of creatives or technical people say that lifetime value stuff, that really sounds like accounting. I did terrible in school in accounting. How am I going to do that with my client? Again, it's not rocket science. It is basically walking them through with fresh eyes. You're adding value because you do have the fresh eyes to their business. If you can bring with some experience from previous clients that match up really well, like that one story I told that only does websites for cities, they know what worked in other cities. They're bringing those successes with them. And the client gets that benefit. So it's not too much accounting, but it does take some adding of numbers. You know Huge. Has anybody else heard of Huge before? A couple of people. Really large, no pun intended, digital agency. But they didn't start that way. And actually, they started just like most every agency I've ever seen. Small.
They changed their name.
You know, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if they changed their name. But I read this quote about Aaron. He goes, what happened? How'd you grow so quickly? And one of their founding principles was when a client came to us to redesign their website, we changed the conversation. We started talking about the business and the solutions and the problems. The redesign is what comes later. So if you want to grow your business and a client comes to you and you're qualifying them, ask them the question, do you just want a website because? Or do you want a website that transforms your business? The latter will cost more money. The latter is probably the client you want because they will treat you as a partner, as a trusted advisor if you do it right. Parting thoughts. Scoping for higher projects is a process. You have to go into it knowing that you're not going to know everything right away and that you just have to add a little bit each time. Stop undercharging. If you're just doing bill by the hour, I understand it's easy, clients kind of understand those things, but it's limited to how many people you've got available. And that's not the best way to grow and leverage your business. I know some experts, they charge $1,000 an hour, and people are lined up to work with them at $1,000 an hour because they add value with what they do. In the right cases, look at the cost of them not taking your solution. Dig into that. Remember the pain we talked about, the aspirin versus the vitamins? What's the pain of them not moving forward? What is it costing them every month that they leave those leads out there or they're getting charged by this other provider? The e-commerce story I told you, the cost of them not switching was $7,000 a month. So when we put a bill in front of them for $15,000, Do you think that they were ready to sign? Absolutely. She actually kissed me. It's the only time I've ever had someone kiss me with me telling them it's going to cost you $15,000 a month. Communicate the ROI. Understand what that ROI is. There's always going to be an investment. Value-based pricing is not about cost, it's about investment. It may sound like words, but it's mindset, it's belief. And it's your job as the consultant, as the expert, to change the conversation with your clients, not just accept everything they say. You must differentiate. You must be different. A commodity will not get higher profits. I see gas as a commodity. I don't know if it is or not. I mean, maybe some experts in the room around cars could tell me that QT is better than Amoco or vice versa. I just look at the price. But when it comes to your business, is that the way you want to see it? And then confidence. It all comes back to confidence. When I'm working with my clients, we identify how they move forward. Confidence. You've got to be confident in value-based pricing if you believe in it. You can do it piece by piece. You don't have to do it all at once. You can kind of tiptoe into this. It's not a, all or nothing concept. So which do you want to be? The trusted advisor or the slimy, shifty used car salesman? I know those are extremes, but the trusted advisor, of course. So now we have questions and my details. Go ahead.
Do you charge hourly at all, specifically for maintenance after you scope out a project? How do you charge for a client after the initial work is done? Do you get a retainer? How do you sell them on that? What do you get for it?
So I don't own an agency now.
Right. Not you,
But when I worked for an agency, there was typically an expectation of what it's going to take to maintain this site. And every site was different. I didn't like everyone gets a $300 bill a month. I would look at it and say, what do you need to maintain this? And I really don't like the word maintenance. If you change one thing, if you learn one thing from me today, change the way you sell that ongoing fee is to continuous improvement. The clients like it more and they will pay you more because you change those words. But it is figured usually by what does it cost to deliver this, but what is the value to the customer? Like if they absolutely don't have anybody to do this, then you could probably charge more money than someone that's just, hey, you do it because it's easy. Questions?
Eugene, can you comment on value-based pricing in an environment where the requirements are ambiguous, or you don't already have that trusted relationship established?
Well, when you're working really hard to try to understand what the scope of something is, so you can give a big budget. I know you work with big projects, right? Are you talking about government specifically, or?
No, not necessarily government, because that's a whole different policy and procedures that oftentimes rules that out. But large enterprise.
So the question was and I want to make sure I understood. When you don't have that relationship and things are a little bit ambiguous with projects, how do you move forward? And I think it goes back to that Aaron's quote. You got to change the conversation. If they just want you to scope features and functions, that might not be the best business for you. Because there is someone out there that will value you taking them through this process and investing in it. I said this before, I really love the fact that you can say, we'll work with you if we can do this upfront project and it's 3 days work. And we do that strategy piece before I can go any further. If they're not willing to invest in that, a lot of times they're going to be a pain in the ass later. Any other questions?
I'll just validate the part around qualifications being so critical. One of the favorite examples we have at Media Current is if 10 people respond to an RFP, there inevitably usually is, one winner, but the other real winners in this scenario are the ones who spent 30 minutes qualifying the RFP and saying no, because they didn't feel like the requirements were defined enough.
Yeah.
Or they didn't feel like they were a good fit in position well. So they're a winner as well because there's probably 9 other firms who spent potentially hundreds of hours responding to an RFP that were never qualified for in the first place.
Yeah.
Or a good fit for it.
Qualifying is really important. I mean, I think scoping is probably the most important skill to grow your business. But qualifying really comes a close second because if you're spending time with people that aren't right for you, you really will waste a lot of time. So the better you get at qualifying, the better you're going to be able to get the business you want. I know that when I was working with Jason, I still believe in this concept, depending on the way you look at it. I won 6 or 7 deals in a row. And a lot of people go, how did you do that? I'm like, well, I disqualified a lot of people because they weren't a good fit. But the ones I put proposals in front of them in a row. Because I qualified. Every conversation was about qualifying. I had people ask me, can you just give me a proposal and send it over to me? And I would respond, no, we're not ready. In order for me to be ready, I've got to have you sit down with the director of operations and we got to go through your project. When can you get your whole team in the room to do that? Well, it's going to take at least a week. All right. We're available tomorrow if you want to do it, but if you want to wait a week, that's fine too.
Just wanted to make a comment about scoping. Obviously, all of us in the services business, it is, near to our hearts, it's a critical component of delivery. So, one of the things I have learned, or anybody who's getting interested, is that particularly when you're dealing with either uninformed clients or ambiguous requirements or combination of things, is that you're better off, and kind of echoing what Dave was saying, is sticking to the constants that you know and working with those until you get well enough into it so you can change the scope or work the scope. For instance, timelines or specific milestones or budget. Because a lot of times you can kind of get derailed, even if you're a trusted advisor, because the scope can change for a number of reasons. A lot of people in the mix, the decision maker doesn't make decisions, not involved or informed. So we found that stick to what you know for a fact, and oftentimes these days is budget, because budget most of the time is immovable, right? Until you get through that first phase, then it's a lot easier to work the scope. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's a big movement, and this ties into exactly what you said about overcoming fear. It's the challenger-based selling model. A lot of us in the room are given, even when we're given the budget by the client, and we know and think it's too low, we're too afraid to challenge them and say, you realize your budget isn't right if you want to do this project correctly, or we're too afraid to push back on on the budget that they have in mind for what they need to do this rule-based project for.
Has anybody, well, let me just explain it because it's not known to everybody, but Harvard Business Review did that study on salespeople. And I can't remember the exact pieces to it, but everyone thought the relationship builder is the type of sales would be the highest producer across all these different industries. Does everyone know what the relationship sales means? Well, it turned out it wasn't. It was the challenger.
Can you explain what the relationship is?
A relationship salesman is the one who's like, they go take you to golf, they take you to dinner, they entertain you, and they build relationships, right? And then they expect the team to kind of pick up the pieces and everything else. The one who performed the best across all these industries, and I think it was thousands of industries, more than 2 to 1 across all the other different types. If you give me your card, I'll send you the email. But the challenger is the one who is willing to stand up and say, you know what? This might not be the best way to do this. If your budget is only $150,000, you're throwing it away. Because you have nothing else after that to maintain this and continuous improvement and to drive traffic or do whatever else. So if your budget is $150,000, you're in trouble because you should be looking at something at $50,000. What can we get done for $50,000 and use the $100,000 to promote that? The challenger steps up and is not afraid to show his boldness and his authority and bring that with him to the conversation in sales. So if you're hiring a person, it's not the guy who everyone likes. Sometimes it might be the guy that, not the rudest guy in the room, but the one who knows a lot and can really serve the client and will tell them what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear.
But what if based on what you say that you get that negative effect from that client, then how do you deal with that?
What's the question?
So pretty much what you just mentioned about you challenge it and say, hey, with this budget we can do this and you can't do this or whatnot.
You can't win every project.
Right.
If you're trying to be all things to all people, you will lose at this game. And so you've got to know who to say no to. And the quicker you get that, the better.
There's a good blog post that might help some people get context around it. If you'll Google beans up your nose.
Okay.
By Jared Spool. If anybody does usability, they know Jared Spool. But beans up your nose. He basically describes the greatest advice he got when he started his usability consultancy was that clients, for whatever reason, will hopelessly shove beans up their nose. No matter what you do, you can't explain to them this is going to stop your breathing, it's going to feel uncomfortable, you're going to hate the bean up your nose, whatever.
Yeah.
But as he says, they have a nose, the beans are there, they have to come together. And this has been very helpful for me because this is the way I've become more comfortable with challenging people.
Good.
Or just understanding that I can't fix stupid. And his advice is, if they want to put beans up your nose, you can tell them what that's going to feel like and how that's going to work. But they're going to do it, and all we can really do is walk away or sit back and wait for them to say, hey, that really sucked. I'd like to find out how to get the bean out of my nose, breathe better, and do that kind of stuff. But some clients are too proud to do that.
Yeah.
Prospects, and you'll never hear from them again. And that's fine too. It's services.
So I'm going to wrap this up, and I know there's more questions. If you want the slides, there's the URL. And if you've got a question for me that you want to ask through Facebook, go to askgene.me. It'll go straight to Facebook. You can ask me. I'll respond to it. If there's a specific question that you would like to ask and you want it to be more private, or you just want to chat with me, come up and introduce yourself. Give me your card because I make a little bit of time in my schedule to talk to you. I can't promise I'll call you, be able to schedule something, but my team will get back with you and schedule, 30 minutes or something, and we'll talk. If that would help you, great. And anything else? If you guys want that infographic, it's on this slide as well, the DC Atlanta. All right, thanks.